I watched my brother-in-law's face drain of color as he stared at the dinner check. $347. His hands trembled as he looked around our packed restaurant searching for me. When our eyes met across the dining room, I saw the panic set in. He mouthed the word discount and pointed desperately at the bill. I slowly stood up from my chef's table, walked over, and delivered the words that would change everything between our families forever. I'm sorry, but that discount is only for family. 6 months earlier, I was living what most people would call the American dream. My name is Patty, and at 32 years old, I had spent 5 grueling years transforming a failing diner on Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard into Portland's most coveted farm-to-table restaurant. Harvest Table wasn't just a business to me. It was proof that a girl who grew up bouncing between foster homes could build something beautiful and lasting. My older sister Claire and I had made a pact when we were kids, huddled together in our 3rd foster placement after our parents died in that horrific car accident on Interstate 84. I was only 8, then Claire was 12. We promised each other that no matter what happened, we would always have each other's backs. Blood might have made us sisters, but our shared trauma had forged us into something stronger, or so I believed. The restaurant industry in Portland is notoriously competitive. Food Network had featured 3 establishments within 5 blocks of mine, and every month seemed to bring another James Beard Award winner to the neighborhood. But Harvest Table had carved out its own niche by focusing on locally sourced ingredients and recipes that told stories. Many of my signature dishes were inspired by the random meals Claire and I would cobble together in various foster kitchens, elevated with professional techniques I'd learned during my culinary training. Claire had been putting off visiting the restaurant for almost 2 years. Every time I invited her, she had an excuse. Derek had to work late. The twins had soccer practice. They were going out of town. Part of me wondered if she was embarrassed by my success, but I pushed those thoughts away. Foster kids learn early not to rock the boat with the few family connections they have. When she finally called that Tuesday afternoon in March, her voice bubbled with uncharacteristic excitement. "Patty, I think it's finally time Derek and I came to try your place. Can you get us a table this Saturday night? We want to bring Madison and Mason too. Make it special." My heart soared. I immediately started planning the perfect evening. I reserved our family table a cozy corner spot near the kitchen that I kept available for special occasions. I designed a custom tasting menu featuring dishes that would remind Claire of our childhood adventures. There was the elevated version of the canned tomato soup and grilled cheese we used to make ourselves when our foster mom worked double shifts. I planned a dessert inspired by the birthday cake we shared with plastic forks behind a grocery store when we had nowhere else to go on Claire's 14th birthday. Saturday evening arrived with typical Pacific Northwest drizzle. I had decorated the family table with small framed photos of Claire and me from various stages of our lives. Pictures from foster family gatherings, my culinary school graduation, Claire's college graduation, her wedding day where I was maid of honor. I wanted her to see how proud I was of our journey. They arrived 30 minutes late, which immediately set my teeth on edge. In the restaurant business, late arrivals can throw off the entire evening's rhythm. But when I saw them walk through the door, my irritation melted into confusion. Claire wore a designer dress I had never seen before, something that probably cost more than most of my servers made in a week. The fabric looked like silk, and the cut screamed expensive boutique rather than department store. Derek strutted beside her in a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly clearly tailored rather than off the rack. Even the twins Madison and Mason looked like they were dressed for a country club event rather than dinner with their aunt. Claire's greeting felt distant, almost formal. She gave me a quick hug that barely lasted 2 seconds, and when I tried to hold her a moment longer, she pulled away. Her eyes scanned the dining room with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it disappointment? Judgment I couldn't tell? "This is smaller than I expected," she said as I led them to the family table. The comment hit me like a slap. I had always been proud of Harvest Table's intimate atmosphere. Food critics consistently praised the cozy ambiance that made diners feel like they were eating in a sophisticated friend's dining room rather than an impersonal restaurant. Derek barely acknowledged my presence beyond a brief nod. Throughout the seating process, his phone kept buzzing and he answered every call. His voice carried across the dining room as he discussed quarterly sales figures and regional territory expansions. Other diners started glancing our way with annoyed expressions. In a restaurant that prided itself on creating a peaceful escape from the city's hustle, Derek's behavior felt like nails on a chalkboard. When I presented the custom menu I had designed explaining the personal significance behind each dish, Claire barely glanced at it. Instead, she flipped to the regular menu and immediately gravitated toward the most expensive options. Derek ordered our $38 dry-aged ribeye without even asking about preparation methods. Claire chose the $42 Pacific Northwest seafood risotto despite being allergic to shellfish when we were kids. The twins ordered dishes they couldn't pronounce, influenced by their parents' apparent desire to order based on price rather than preference. As the evening progressed, Derek's phone calls became more frequent and louder. He discussed golf plans with someone named Brad, while my servers tried to deliver bread service. He negotiated what sounded like a fishing trip during the appetizer course. When our sommelier approached to discuss wine pairings, Derek cut him off mid-sentence to take another call about weekend plans that clearly had nothing to do with any urgent business matter. The breaking point came during dessert service. I had prepared a special version of that childhood birthday cake memory transformed into an elegant lavender honey panna cotta with handcrafted sugarwork. As I approached the table to personally present the dessert and share its significance, Claire suddenly announced they needed to leave. "Derek has an important client meeting," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We really have to go." I knew she was lying. I had overheard Derek's last 3 phone calls all about recreational weekend activities. The important client meeting was clearly fictional. But what hurt more was the dismissive way she said it, like my carefully planned evening meant nothing compared to Derek's social calendar. "Let me comp your meal," I offered, trying to salvage something from the evening. "This is a family celebration. It's my pleasure to treat you." Claire's response cut deeper than any knife in my kitchen. "We don't need charity, Patty. We can afford to eat here." Her tone carried implications that stung. She wasn't just declining a generous gesture. She was creating distance, suggesting that accepting my hospitality would somehow diminish their status. As they gathered their things to leave, Derek finally put away his phone long enough to make direct eye contact with me. "Nice little place you've got here," he said, his words carrying a patronizing undertone that made my stomach clench. "Keep working hard. Maybe someday you'll have something really impressive." They left without finishing dessert, without properly saying goodbye to the kitchen staff who had worked extra hard to make their evening special, and without acknowledging the effort I had put into creating a meaningful family experience. I stood in my dining room surrounded by the photos I had carefully arranged, watching their expensive car pull away into the Portland night. The photos seemed to mock me now. All those memories of Claire and me, supporting each other through impossible circumstances. All those promises we had made about always being there for each other. Something fundamental had shifted in my sister, and I didn't understand what or why. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to convince myself that their awkward visit was just a misunderstanding. Maybe Derek really had been dealing with work stress. Maybe Claire was going through something personal she didn't feel comfortable discussing. I made excuses for behavior that deep down I knew was inexcusable. Then I started seeing the social media posts. Claire had always been active on Facebook and Instagram, but suddenly her feed was flooded with photos from expensive restaurants across the Pacific Northwest. She posted pictures from Seattle's most exclusive establishments, tagged Portland's celebrity chef restaurants, and shared stories from weekend trips to San Francisco food festivals. What struck me most wasn't just the frequency of these posts, but the captions she wrote. Nothing beats supporting local family businesses. She captioned a photo from a celebrity chef's restaurant chain that had 40 locations across the country. "When you want real fine dining, you go where the professionals are. accompanied a picture from a corporate steakhouse in downtown Portland. Each post felt like a deliberate slight against my establishment. The worst part was watching her tag other family members and friends in these posts, while never once mentioning her visit to Harvest Table. She shared photos with our foster sister Amy from a brunch at a chain restaurant captioned, "Family time at the best spots." She posted pictures with Derek's colleagues from company dinner events at establishments that charged twice what I did for half the quality. Through mutual connections in Portland's tight-knit food community, I started hearing whispers about what Claire was saying behind my back. A server who worked at another restaurant mentioned that Claire had told her friends my place was quaint but overpriced for what you get. A local food blogger casually mentioned that someone had told her Harvest Table was not really fine dining, more like elevated comfort food. The most devastating revelation came through our foster sister Amy, who called me one evening sounding uncomfortable and hesitant. "Patty, I need to tell you something, but I don't want to cause family drama." She paused, and I could hear her children playing in the background. "Claire's been telling people that your restaurant is struggling. She's been discouraging people from going there, saying they should support more established places instead." Amy continued, her voice getting quieter as if she was afraid someone might overhear. "She showed me screenshots of reviews that mentioned your prices, and she was laughing about them. She said something about how you're charging fancy restaurant prices for amateur food. I thought you should know because she's been doing this for weeks, and people are starting to ask me about it." The betrayal felt like a physical blow. Claire wasn't just being unsupportive. She was actively working to undermine my business. In an industry where reputation and word-of-mouth recommendations could make or break an establishment, her behavior was potentially devastating. I started doing some research of my own and discovered that Derek had recently received a massive promotion. He was now Regional Sales Director for Cascade Pharmaceutical Solutions, a position that came with a salary increase of over $60,000 annually. They had moved from their modest apartment in southeast Portland to a 4-bedroom house in Lake Oswego, one of the area's most prestigious neighborhoods. Derek had also joined Riverside Golf and Country Club, where membership fees alone cost more than many people's annual salaries. The pieces started falling into place. Claire's new designer clothes, their expensive dining habits, the children's upscale appearance, Derek's dismissive attitude toward my little place. They weren't just doing well financially, they were actively trying to elevate their social status and saw my blue-collar restaurant background as an embarrassment to their new lifestyle. When our annual foster family reunion approached in May, I decided to extend an olive branch. I called Claire and offered to host the event at Harvest Table. The reunion usually rotated between different family members' homes, but I thought providing a professional venue might be a nice gesture. "That's a wonderful idea," Claire said, her enthusiasm sounding genuine for the first time in months. "But I think we should probably hire real catering to supplement your food. You know how some of our foster siblings have really made something of themselves, and we want to make sure the food is sophisticated enough for everyone's expectations." The comment hit me like a punch to the stomach. Real catering. As if the food that had earned my restaurant recognition from Food Network and 3 major food critics wasn't sophisticated enough for a family gathering. But Claire wasn't finished. "I've been thinking that maybe I should co-host with you. I have experience planning corporate events through Derek's company, and I know what people expect from upscale gatherings. We could order some appetizers from Andina or Le Pigeon to make sure we have options that people will recognize as high quality." She wanted to bring in food from my competitors to supplement what I would serve at my own restaurant during an event celebrating our shared family history. The audacity was breathtaking. During our planning conversations over the next week, Claire consistently undermined my suggestions. When I proposed a menu featuring elevated versions of comfort foods that would remind everyone of our shared foster care experiences, she suggested we keep things simple and order crowd pleasers from established restaurants. When I mentioned wine pairings featuring local Oregon vineyards, she suggested we just provide beer and basic cocktails because not everyone has developed sophisticated palates. The final straw came when our foster sister Amy called me after speaking with Claire about the reunion plans. "I'm so confused," Amy said. "Claire told me that you're having financial troubles and that the family should keep their expectations realistic for the reunion. She said everyone should probably eat beforehand because your restaurant might not be able to handle feeding 20 people properly." Financial troubles. As if the restaurant that had been featured in Portland Monthly magazine and consistently booked solid reservations 3 weeks out was struggling to stay afloat. Claire was systematically undermining my reputation within our own family, portraying herself as the successful sister who had to manage expectations around my failing business. I realized that this wasn't just about restaurant preferences or social climbing. Claire was rewriting our family narrative, positioning herself as the foster kid who had truly succeeded, while painting me as the one who was still struggling to find her footing. She was erasing years of my hard work and success to elevate her own status within our family and social circles. The girl I had shared foster home bedrooms with, who had promised we would always support each other, was actively sabotaging my livelihood to protect her own image. The pain of that realization was deeper than anything I had experienced since those early days after our parents died. The foster family reunion became a masterclass in humiliation that I never saw coming. 23 of our former foster siblings and their families gathered at Harvest Table on a sunny Saturday in late May. I had prepared for weeks, creating a menu that told the story of our collective journey from institutional care to independent adulthood. Each dish represented different memories we shared, different foster homes where we had crossed paths, different moments when we had supported each other through impossible circumstances. Claire arrived early ostensibly to help with setup, but immediately began rearranging my carefully planned seating chart. "I think we should put the more successful families at the head tables," she said, moving name cards around without consulting me. "Amy's husband is a software engineer now, and Marcus owns his own accounting firm. They should be prominently placed." As guests arrived, Claire positioned herself at the entrance like an unofficial hostess. Instead of introducing people to me as the restaurant owner and reunion organizer, she spent time explaining the venue choice. "Patty's really trying her best with this place," I heard her tell Marcus and his wife. "We thought it would be nice to give her some business since she's been struggling with the competition in Portland." Struggling with competition. My restaurant had a 3-week waiting list and had been approached by 2 different investment groups about expansion opportunities. But Claire's narrative was spreading through our family like poison. During the cocktail hour, I overheard Derek talking to several of the men about his new position at Cascade Pharmaceutical. He spoke loudly about quarterly bonuses and regional territories, making sure everyone understood his elevated status. When someone asked him about supporting family businesses, Derek laughed and said, "Well, we try to help out where we can, but you have to be realistic about quality expectations." The comments continued throughout the evening. Claire made apologetic remarks about the portion sizes, suggesting people might want to grab food elsewhere afterward. Derek openly criticized the wine selection, claiming his country club had much more sophisticated options. When our foster brother James complimented the creativity of my menu, Claire quickly changed the subject to restaurant recommendations in downtown Portland. But the worst moment came during dinner service itself. Claire stood up to make what I assumed would be a thank you toast, recognizing my efforts to host everyone. Instead, she launched into a speech about perseverance and realistic expectations. "Some people peak early in life," she said, looking directly at me while addressing the room. "They might show early promise or have initial success, but real achievement comes from sustained effort and smart decision-making. It's about building something that lasts, not just something that gets temporary attention." She continued discussing Derek's career trajectory and their new lifestyle, while I stood frozen behind the service station. "We're grateful for this opportunity to gather as a family, even if the setting isn't what we're used to. Sometimes you have to meet people where they are in life, not where you wish they could be." The room went silent. Our foster family had learned early in life to recognize cruelty disguised as concern, and everyone understood exactly what Claire was doing. She was publicly diminishing my achievements while elevating her own status, using our family reunion as a platform to establish social hierarchy. Amy caught my eye from across the room and shook her head slightly, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as Claire continued her monologue about success and proper planning. Even the children seemed to sense the tension in the room. After the reunion ended and the last guests departed, Derek approached me while Claire gathered her purse and jacket. "You know, Patty, you might want to think about your long-term strategy here," he said, gesturing around the dining room that I had built from nothing. "Family restaurants usually fail within 5 years. The statistics are pretty brutal." He pulled out his business card and handed it to me with the confidence of someone offering charity to the less fortunate. "I could put you in touch with some commercial real estate contacts, people who specialize in helping restaurant owners transition to more realistic career options. There's no shame in recognizing when it's time to move on to something more stable." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Here was a man who had never worked a day in the food service industry, never built anything from the ground up, never risked everything on a dream offering to help me find an exit strategy from my own success story. That night, after cleaning up from the reunion and sending my staff home, I sat alone in my restaurant feeling more isolated than I had since those early days in foster care. But underneath the hurt and anger, something else was growing determination. I started researching Derek's new company initially, just to understand the source of his newfound arrogance. Cascade Pharmaceutical Solutions was a regional distribution company that had been acquired by a larger national corporation 2 years earlier. Derek's promotion had coincided with the acquisition, and his new role involved managing relationships with major healthcare clients across the Pacific Northwest. What I discovered through industry contacts and public business filings was fascinating. Derek's position came with extremely strict ethics guidelines about conflicts of interest and outside business relationships. His company had specific policies about employees and their family members receiving special treatment or discounts from vendors. Any potential conflict of interest had to be disclosed and approved through their corporate compliance department. More interesting was the discovery that Cascade Pharmaceutical had a massive corporate account with Pinnacle Restaurant Group, a company that owned 12 upscale dining establishments across Oregon and Washington. Derek was directly involved in steering corporate entertaining and client dinners toward Pinnacle Properties, part of a negotiated agreement that provided his company with preferred pricing and VIP treatment. I realized that Derek's dismissive attitude toward my restaurant wasn't just snobbery. My success represented a potential conflict of interest for his career. If Harvest Table became too prominent, or if our family relationship became too publicly known, it could complicate his position with Pinnacle Restaurant Group. He needed me to remain small and insignificant to avoid any corporate complications. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation. While researching his company for potential catering opportunities, I discovered that Cascade Pharmaceutical's largest client was the same investment group that had been courting my restaurant for expansion opportunities. Northwest Medical Ventures wasn't just Derek's company's biggest customer, they were also the financial group that wanted to turn Harvest Table into a regional restaurant chain. The irony was perfect. Derek was working to keep me small and unsuccessful while his company's biggest client wanted to make me their flagship restaurant investment. His professional success depended on the very people who saw my business as their next major opportunity. As I pieced together these connections over the following weeks, a plan began to form in my mind. Derek and Claire had spent months undermining my reputation and diminishing my achievements. They had used family gatherings and social media to portray me as the unsuccessful foster kid who couldn't quite make it in the real world. But they had no idea that their actions were about to backfire in spectacular fashion. I decided it was time for a reconciliation dinner that would give them exactly what they thought they wanted: a chance to be publicly superior to their struggling sister-in-law. What they didn't know was that they were about to walk into a situation where their assumptions would be exposed in the most humiliating way possible. planning Derek and Claire's downfall required the same attention to detail that had made Harvest Table successful. Every element needed to align perfectly, creating a situation where their own arrogance and assumptions would become the instruments of their humiliation. The first piece fell into place when Northwest Medical Ventures formally offered me a partnership deal to expand Harvest Table into a regional chain of farm-to-table restaurants. The lead investor, Catherine Morrison, was a former pharmaceutical executive who had built her fortune by identifying undervalued companies in health-related industries. She had discovered my restaurant through food industry networks and saw an opportunity to create something special. "We're specifically looking for authentic, family-owned establishments," Catherine explained during our initial meeting at her downtown Portland office. "The market is oversaturated with corporate dining experiences. Consumers want real stories, real connections, real food prepared by people who care about more than profit margins." During our conversation, Catherine mentioned that her investment group worked extensively with healthcare companies throughout the Pacific Northwest. "We find that authentic dining experiences are perfect for client entertainment. Healthcare executives are tired of the same old corporate restaurant chains. They want somewhere unique that tells a story." When she mentioned Cascade Pharmaceutical Solutions as one of their major clients, I nearly choked on my coffee. "They're our largest account," Catherine continued. "We handle their investment portfolio and they spend significant money on client entertainment. Derek Johnson, their regional sales director, has been asking us for restaurant recommendations that would impress their biggest customers." Derek had been asking Catherine's company for restaurant recommendations while simultaneously working to undermine my success. The irony was too perfect to ignore. I scheduled a follow-up meeting with Catherine's team for the following week, timing it perfectly with my plan for Derek and Claire's reconciliation dinner. I wanted them to witness firsthand the level of success they had been trying to diminish. The invitation strategy required delicate psychological manipulation. I called Claire on a Tuesday afternoon, choosing a time when I knew Derek would be at work and unable to influence her response. "Claire, I've been doing a lot of thinking since the reunion," I said, injecting just the right amount of vulnerability into my voice. "I realize I might have been defensive about some of the feedback you and Derek gave me. I want to invite you both for dinner this Saturday so I can show you how much the restaurant has grown and maybe get some more of your honest input." The key was making Claire feel like she was being asked for guidance rather than being offered hospitality. Her response was predictably patronizing. "Oh, Patty, I'm so glad you're being open to constructive criticism. Derek and I have been talking about ways we could help you improve your business model. We'd love to come and give you some professional insights." Professional insights from a pharmaceutical sales director and his wife who had never worked in the restaurant industry. But Claire's condescending tone told me she had taken the bait completely. "There's one small favor I need to ask," I continued. "Derek mentioned at the reunion that his new boss was visiting Portland soon. If it's not too much trouble, could you possibly bring him and his wife? I'd love to show them that I can provide the kind of sophisticated dining experience that successful professionals expect." Claire practically purred with satisfaction. "What a wonderful idea. Mr. Thompson has been looking for good restaurant recommendations for when his team visits Portland. This could be a great networking opportunity for Derek." Perfect. She had no idea that she was about to bring Derek's boss to witness his family relationship management skills in the most public way possible. The next phase involved careful coordination with my staff and strategic guest management. I booked their reservation for 7:30 on Saturday night primetime for our busiest service. But I didn't mention that Harvest Table was now completely booked 3 weeks in advance, or that Saturday night had become our most coveted seating. I also failed to mention the recent accolades we had received. Food Network had featured us in a segment about emerging culinary destinations. Portland Monthly had named us one of the city's top 5 farm-to-table establishments. The Oregon Restaurant Association had nominated us for 3 different awards. Derek and Claire were walking into Portland's hottest dining scene while still thinking of us as the quiet neighborhood place we had been years earlier. The guest list for that evening required careful curation. Through industry connections, I ensured that several of Derek's colleagues from Cascade Pharmaceutical would be dining at the restaurant that night. His boss's visit provided the perfect cover for their presence, as it would seem natural for company employees to be entertaining clients at Portland's most talked-about restaurant. I also scheduled Catherine Morrison and her investment team to be present for what I called a casual observation evening as part of their due diligence process. They would witness the restaurant operating at peak capacity while evaluating the expansion potential. The menu for that evening was carefully designed to showcase everything Derek had dismissed about my capabilities. Our prix-fixe dinner included wine pairings from small Oregon vineyards, locally foraged ingredients and preparation techniques that demonstrated serious culinary skill. The cost was $275 per person for the standard menu with a VIP tasting option at $350 per person. Derek had no idea about current pricing because he had never actually looked at our menu during his visit 6 months earlier. He had ordered based on assumptions rather than information, and those assumptions were about to cost him dearly. The family discount policy required careful legal documentation. I worked with my attorney to establish a written policy stating that family discounts only applied to immediate family members who had maintained supportive relationships with the establishment and provided advance notification of their desire to utilize family pricing. The policy required documentation of the supportive relationship and a 24-hour advance notice for discount application. Since Claire had spent months actively undermining my business, and Derek had never requested family pricing during their previous visit, neither condition had been met. But the most crucial element was psychological preparation. I needed to be ready for Derek's inevitable assumption that family privilege would rescue him from the consequences of his arrogance. He had spent months treating me like the unsuccessful sister-in-law who should be grateful for his attention. On Saturday night, he was about to discover exactly how wrong those assumptions were. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected bonus when Claire called to confirm their reservation. "Derek is so excited about this opportunity," she gushed. "Mr. Thompson was impressed that Derek has a sister-in-law in the restaurant business. It makes Derek seem more well-connected than some of his colleagues." Derek was using our family relationship to enhance his professional image while simultaneously working to undermine my success. The hypocrisy was staggering, but it also provided the perfect setup for what was about to unfold. As Saturday approached, I felt a calm sense of anticipation rather than nervousness. Every element was in place. Derek and Claire would arrive expecting to find the same quiet neighborhood restaurant they had dismissed months earlier. Instead, they would discover Portland's most sought-after dining destination filled with business leaders, food critics, and Derek's own colleagues. Most importantly, they would learn that assumptions about family privilege could be costly when those assumptions were built on a foundation of betrayal and disrespect. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes Portland dining magical. By 6:30, Harvest Table was humming with the controlled energy that defined our peak service hours. Every table was occupied by carefully selected guests who would witness what was about to unfold. Catherine Morrison and her investment team occupied a prominent corner table, ostensibly reviewing market research while actually observing our operations. 3 separate tables hosted Derek's colleagues from Cascade Pharmaceutical, each entertaining different healthcare clients as part of their company's ongoing business development efforts. Food critics from Portland Monthly and the Oregonian sat at opposite ends of the dining room, both there for unrelated reviews that would coincidentally document the evening's events. At exactly 7:15, valet parking became available outside our entrance. This was new since Derek and Claire's last visit, a service we had added to accommodate the luxury vehicles that increasingly filled our clientele. The young man handling parking duties had specific instructions to treat every arrival like visiting dignitary, part of the elevated experience that had become Harvest Table's signature. Derek and Claire arrived in Derek's new BMW sedan, clearly expecting to find street parking and a quiet neighborhood atmosphere. When the valet approached their vehicle, Derek looked confused before reluctantly handing over his keys. Claire emerged from the passenger side wearing another expensive dress, this one in deep emerald that probably cost more than my sous chef made in 2 weeks. Behind them, a black town car pulled up carrying Derek's boss, Mr. Thompson, and his wife, Margaret. Thompson was a distinguished man in his early 60s, the kind of pharmaceutical executive who commanded respect through decades of industry experience. His wife carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to high-level corporate entertainment. The hostess station, normally staffed by one person during slow periods, now required 3 team members to manage the constant flow of arrivals and departures. When Derek's group approached our hostess, Emily checked her reservation system and informed them there would be a 45-minute wait despite having confirmed reservations. "I'm sorry, but we're running slightly behind this evening due to unusually high demand," Emily explained with professional courtesy. "We can offer you seats in our wine bar area while we prepare your table." Derek's confidence visibly wavered as he surveyed the crowded dining room. This wasn't the quiet family restaurant he had dismissed 6 months earlier. The space buzzed with conversations conducted in multiple languages, the gentle clinking of wine glasses, and the sophisticated energy of Portland's business elite. Mr. Thompson seemed impressed rather than annoyed by the delay. "Derek, you didn't mention your sister-in-law's restaurant was this popular," he commented, watching well-dressed couples navigate the wait for their own tables. "This seems like exactly the kind of place we should be bringing our major clients." Claire's expression shifted from confident superiority to nervous uncertainty as she recognized several faces from Derek's company scattered throughout the dining room. She had expected to find a struggling neighborhood establishment where she could demonstrate her sophisticated palate to Derek's boss. Instead, she was surrounded by Derek's colleagues and competitors, all apparently regular patrons of the restaurant she'd been actively discouraging people from visiting. When Emily finally seated them at their reserved table, I personally approached to welcome the group. My chef's whites were pristine, my confidence genuine, and my smile warm but professional. This wasn't the defensive sister-in-law they had last encountered, but the successful restaurant owner I had always been. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, welcome to Harvest Table," I said, extending my hand to Derek's boss first. "Derek has told me so much about your visit to Portland. I've prepared our signature tasting menu for this evening, featuring ingredients from farms within 50 miles of the restaurant." Thompson's handshake was firm, his smile genuine. Derek never mentioned his sister-in-law was the owner of Portland's most talked-about restaurant. "We've been trying to get reservations here for months." Derek's face flushed slightly as he realized his failure to mention our family connection had created an awkward situation with his boss. He'd been so focused on distancing himself from my success that he had missed an obvious networking opportunity. "The tasting menu sounds perfect," Thompson continued. "Margaret and I have been looking forward to experiencing what everyone's been talking about. Derek, you should have told us you had an inside connection to Portland's best restaurant." An inside connection? If only Thompson knew how Derek had actually been treating that connection over the past 6 months. Our sommelier James approached the table with wine pairing recommendations. Derek, clearly trying to impress his boss while recovering from his initial discomfort, immediately requested our most expensive wine pairings without asking about pricing. "Excellent choice," James said with professional enthusiasm. "Our premium pairing includes selections from 5 different Oregon vineyards, including a 1997 Pinot Noir that Wine Spectator rated 93 points. That adds $160 per person to your evening." Derek nodded confidently, apparently assuming that family privilege would somehow reduce the final bill. He had no idea that his assumptions about special treatment were about to collide with reality. As dinner service progressed, Derek's discomfort became increasingly obvious. 2 different colleagues stopped by his table to express surprise at finding him at Harvest Table, clearly unaware of our family connection. Both mentioned that they had been trying unsuccessfully to get reservations for their own client entertainment needs. "Derek, you've been holding out on us," laughed Sandra Wilkins from the company's marketing department. "If you could get us a table here next month, it would solve our biggest client entertainment challenge." Derek forced a smile while internally calculating how to respond. Admitting our family relationship would require acknowledging that he had been downplaying my success to his colleagues. But denying the connection would create problems with his boss, who now believed Derek had deliberately arranged this impressive dining experience. Meanwhile, Catherine Morrison and her investment team were conducting what appeared to be casual dinner conversation, but was actually detailed observation of our operations. Catherine caught my eye at one point and nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by the seamless service and sophisticated clientele. The food itself was performing exactly as intended. Each course demonstrated technical skill, creative presentation, and the kind of flavor complexity that separated serious restaurants from neighborhood establishments. Thompson and his wife were genuinely impressed, asking detailed questions about sourcing and preparation techniques that Derek couldn't answer, despite supposedly being familiar with my restaurant. "Derek, your sister-in-law is incredibly talented," Mrs. Thompson said after tasting our signature mushroom course, featuring 7 varieties of locally foraged fungi. "How long did she train to achieve this level of skill?" Derek's response was awkward and uninformed. He had never bothered to learn about my culinary education or professional background despite months of family interactions. His ignorance about my qualifications became obvious as he stumbled through incomplete answers. But the real tension was building around the financial reality of the evening Derek had unwittingly arranged. The tasting menu, premium wine pairings, and additional cocktails were creating a bill that reflected Harvest Table's true position in Portland's dining hierarchy. Derek had ordered like someone trying to impress his boss without considering the mathematical consequences of his choices. As the evening approached its climax, Derek began showing signs of stress that his boss couldn't help but notice. Perspiration appeared on his forehead despite the comfortable temperature. His laughter became forced, his conversation stilted. He kept glancing toward the kitchen, clearly hoping I would appear to discuss payment arrangements privately. The trap was set perfectly. Derek had positioned himself as someone with connections to Portland's most exclusive restaurant, impressed his boss with the dining experience, and ordered premium everything to demonstrate his sophistication. Now he was about to discover that assumptions about family privilege could be expensive when those assumptions were built on months of betrayal. The check was being prepared in the kitchen, and Derek's moment of truth was approaching rapidly. The dinner service had reached its natural conclusion with our signature dessert course, a deconstructed apple pie featuring locally grown Honeycrisp apples, house-made cinnamon ice cream, and a delicate oat crumble that had become one of our most photographed presentations. Thompson and his wife were effusive in their praise, discussing how impressed their clients would be with future dinners at Harvest Table. "Derek, I'm genuinely surprised you haven't been using this connection more actively," Thompson said as he savored the last spoonful of dessert. "Our client entertainment budget could easily support monthly dinners here. This is exactly the kind of unique Portland experience our East Coast partners are looking for." Derek managed a weak smile while his internal anxiety reached a breaking point. He had been calculating menu prices throughout the evening, and the mathematics were becoming increasingly uncomfortable. The tasting menu at $275 per person, premium wine pairings at $160 each, additional cocktails and appetizers that Thompson had insisted on ordering. For 4 people, the total was approaching numbers that would strain Derek's credit limits. But the real panic set in when Derek realized he had left his corporate entertainment card at home. In his eagerness to impress Thompson by arranging this dinner, he'd forgotten that company policy required pre-approval for client entertainment expenses above $200 per person. The meal he had orchestrated to advance his career was about to become a personal financial crisis. Our server Michael approached the table with the leather check presenter, placing it discreetly beside Derek's place setting. "Thank you so much for dining with us this evening," he said with practiced professionalism. "Please take your time reviewing everything." Derek opened the presenter with hands that trembled slightly, hoping against hope that somehow the numbers would be more manageable than his mental calculations suggested. Instead, he found a total of $347, broken down in precise detail that left no room for interpretation. His face drained of color so dramatically that Mrs. Thompson noticed immediately. "Derek, are you feeling all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine." Derek managed his voice strained as he stared at the numbers that represented more than he typically spent on groceries in 2 months. His first credit card had a remaining limit of approximately $200 after recent country club fees and luxury purchases. His second card might cover the amount, but barely. Thompson glanced at his watch and began gathering his jacket. "This has been absolutely wonderful, Derek. Margaret and I are impressed beyond words. You'll have to get us reservations here for next month's board meeting dinner. Our directors would be thrilled to experience this level of hospitality." Next month's board meeting dinner. Derek was being asked to arrange future corporate entertainment at a restaurant where he couldn't afford a single meal for 4 people. The irony was crushing, but the immediate crisis demanded his attention. "Excuse me for just a moment," Derek said, his voice tight with stress. "I need to clarify something with the server." He stood abruptly, leaving the check presenter open on the table where Thompson could clearly see the total amount. Derek's attempt at discretion had failed completely, exposing both his financial constraints and his assumption that family connections would somehow reduce the bill. Derek wandered through the dining room with increasing desperation, searching for me, while trying to maintain composure in front of his boss and colleagues. Other diners noticed his agitated movement between tables, his obvious distress becoming a minor spectacle in our usually serene environment. He approached 2 different servers, asking for the owner with growing urgency in his voice. Both directed him toward the kitchen area, but I was deliberately positioned at the chef's table in full view of the dining room, consulting with Catherine Morrison's investment team about expansion timelines. When Derek finally spotted me, he began waving frantically from across the room, mouthing the word "discount" while pointing toward his table. The desperation in his gestures was obvious to anyone watching, including his boss, his colleagues, and the food critics who were documenting the evening's service. I saw him clearly, but continued my conversation with Catherine for several more minutes, discussing the feasibility of opening 3 additional locations within 18 months. Derek's increasingly frantic signals provided a surreal backdrop to our business planning discussion. Finally, Derek returned to his table, his professional composure completely shattered. Thompson was reviewing the check details with obvious confusion about Derek's distress, while Mrs. Thompson looked genuinely concerned about her host's apparent health crisis. "Derek, is there some problem with the bill?" Thompson asked directly. "You seem quite upset about something." Derek's response revealed the depth of his miscalculation. "There must be some mistake with the family discount," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Family doesn't charge family full price for dinner." The words hung in the air like an accusation, transforming a private financial crisis into a public family drama. Thompson's eyebrows raised slightly as he processed the implications of Derek's statement. His regional sales director was publicly claiming family privilege to reduce a restaurant bill, apparently without prior arrangement. Family discount. Thompson repeated his tone, suggesting professional rather than personal interest in Derek's assumption. "What kind of arrangement do you have here?" Derek realized too late that his public declaration had created a corporate compliance issue. His company's ethics policies strictly prohibited family members receiving special business treatment that could be perceived as conflicts of interest. By loudly claiming family privilege in front of his boss, Derek had potentially violated company guidelines he was required to follow. The dining room's ambient conversation quieted slightly as Derek's situation became obvious to other patrons. His colleagues from other tables were watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to secondhand embarrassment. Food critics were taking notes about an unusual scene unfolding in one of Portland's most respected restaurants. I slowly stood from my chef's table, knowing that every eye in the restaurant was now watching this family drama play out. Catherine Morrison paused our business discussion to observe how I would handle a difficult customer situation, apparently unaware that the difficult customer was my brother-in-law. Derek watched me approach with a mixture of hope and desperation, clearly expecting me to rescue him from the consequences of his assumptions. He had no idea that this moment had been carefully orchestrated to expose the hypocrisy and entitlement that had defined his treatment of our family relationship. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, and the various Cascade Pharmaceutical employees scattered throughout the dining room were about to witness exactly how Derek's family relationship management skills translated into real-world consequences. The confrontation that would define our family dynamics for years to come was about to unfold in front of Portland's business elite, and Derek had created the stage for his own humiliation through months of arrogance and betrayal. I approached Derek's table with the calm confidence of someone who owned not just the restaurant, but the entire situation. Every step was measured, every movement observed by the dining room full of witnesses Derek had unknowingly assembled for his own reckoning. Standing beside their table with quiet dignity, I looked directly into Derek's panicked eyes and delivered the words that had been months in the making. "I'm sorry, but that discount is only for family." The silence that followed was absolute. 40 conversations stopped simultaneously as the implication of my statement settled over the dining room like fog rolling in from the Columbia River. Derek's face went from pale to crimson as he realized that our family relationship, which he had spent months dismissing and undermining, was being publicly rejected at the moment he needed it most. Thompson's expression shifted from confusion to understanding as he processed what had just occurred. His regional sales director had loudly claimed family privilege that didn't exist, revealing both his assumption of special treatment and his ignorance about his sister-in-law's actual policies. The professional implications were immediate and significant. "I don't understand," Derek stammered, his voice carrying across the quiet dining room. "We're family. This is just a misunderstanding." "Family supports each other," I replied, my voice clear enough for surrounding tables to hear. "Family doesn't spend months telling people that your restaurant is overpriced and not worth visiting. Family doesn't discourage friends and relatives from supporting your business. Family doesn't suggest that you should sell your life's work because it's not impressive enough for their social circle." Each sentence hit Derek like a physical blow, while simultaneously providing context for Thompson and the other observers. They were witnessing not just a billing dispute, but the exposure of Derek's character and values in their most unfiltered form. Mrs. Thompson looked mortified, clearly understanding that her husband's employee had been systematically undermining his own sister-in-law's business while simultaneously planning to use her restaurant for corporate entertainment. The hypocrisy was breathtaking even by corporate standards. Derek fumbled for his wallet with shaking hands, producing 2 credit cards that he hoped would cover the bill he couldn't afford. The first card was declined with an electronic beep that seemed to echo through the silent dining room. The second card processed, but barely leaving Derek's financial limitations exposed to his boss and colleagues. Thompson reached for his own wallet, offering to cover the bill, but Derek's pride prevented him from accepting. The power dynamic between them had shifted dramatically with Thompson, now seeing Derek as someone who lived beyond his means and made assumptions about relationships he hadn't properly maintained. As Derek signed the receipt with trembling hands, Thompson leaned toward me with genuine interest. "I apologize for this awkwardness, but I have to ask about your catering services. My company spends significant money on client entertainment, and this has been an exceptional experience despite the unusual circumstances." The conversation that followed occurred directly in front of Derek, who was forced to listen while his boss enthusiastically discussed business opportunities with the sister-in-law Derek had spent months dismissing. Thompson asked about monthly corporate dining arrangements, weekend retreat catering, and special event planning for pharmaceutical industry conferences. "We work extensively with healthcare companies throughout the Pacific Northwest," I replied, maintaining professional composure while Derek sat frozen in mortification. In fact, your company comes highly recommended by one of our investment partners, Northwest Medical Ventures." Thompson's eyes widened with recognition. "Catherine Morrison's group, they handle our corporate investments. Small world." He glanced at Derek with an expression that suggested this conversation would continue in a corporate setting. "Derek, I'm surprised you haven't mentioned these potential synergies before." Derek had no response because there was no response that wouldn't expose his deliberate efforts to undermine family relationships for his own perceived benefit. He sat in silence while his boss and I exchanged business cards and discussed partnerships that could have been arranged months earlier if Derek had chosen support over sabotage. As Thompson's group prepared to leave, Claire finally broke her mortified silence. "Derek, we need to talk about this at home." She whispered, her embarrassment obvious to everyone nearby. She had realized that her months of social media posts criticizing my restaurant had potentially damaged Derek's career prospects. They departed without further conversation, leaving behind a dining room full of witnesses to Derek's spectacular miscalculation. His colleagues from other tables exchanged meaningful glances, clearly processing how Derek's family relationship management reflected on his professional judgment. 20 minutes later, while I was reviewing kitchen operations with my sous chef Claire, returned alone. Her earlier arrogance had been replaced by genuine remorse, her designer dress now seeming like costume jewelry rather than status symbol. "Patty, I need to apologize," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I've been horrible to you for months, and I don't have any excuse that makes it acceptable." She paused, struggling to find words that could repair the damage she had caused. "I think I was jealous of your success and independence. Derek's promotion made us feel like we needed to elevate our status, and somehow that meant distancing ourselves from anything that reminded us of our foster care background." Her honesty was painful but necessary. "I've been living beyond our means to impress Derek's colleagues, and I convinced myself that your restaurant was somehow holding us back from the social circle we wanted to join. It was cruel and stupid and completely wrong." Claire continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Derek's been getting pressure at work about family conflicts of interest, and instead of supporting you, he decided you were a liability. He thought if you stayed small and unsuccessful, it would eliminate any corporate complications. But he never told me about the investment opportunities you represented." The confession revealed the full scope of their betrayal. Derek hadn't just been dismissive about my success, he had been actively working to limit it for his own professional convenience. Their campaign of undermining my reputation had been deliberate and calculated, designed to serve Derek's career advancement at my expense. But Claire's apology felt genuine, accompanied by tears that seemed to come from deep recognition of how badly she had failed as a sister. "I want to make this right, but I don't know how. I've damaged your reputation with our family and friends. I've said terrible things about your food and your business. I don't know if you can ever forgive me." Over the next several weeks, the consequences of that evening continued to unfold in ways that satisfied my sense of justice, while providing opportunities for genuine reconciliation. Thompson arranged for Derek to receive corporate training on professional networking and family business relationship management, describing it as career development rather than disciplinary action. Derek's colleagues began requesting regular reservations at Harvest Table for their own client entertainment, creating awkward situations where Derek's family connection became obvious to people who had heard his previous dismissive comments about local restaurants. But the most significant change was in Claire herself. She began bringing Madison and Mason for monthly cooking lessons, genuinely interested in reconnecting with the aunt they barely knew. The children were amazed to discover that their quiet Aunt Patty was actually a successful chef whose restaurant appeared in magazines and attracted celebrities. 3 months later, Northwest Medical Ventures announced their partnership with Harvest Table for regional expansion. The press release mentioned Derek's company as a key corporate client, creating professional opportunities he had previously dismissed. Thompson personally called to congratulate me and arrange ongoing corporate dining partnerships. Derek, humbled by his public humiliation and its professional consequences, eventually offered a genuine apology. "I thought keeping you small would protect my career," he admitted during a private conversation. "I never realized that your success could have enhanced my professional opportunities instead of threatening them. I'm sorry for not understanding that family success should lift everyone up, not create competition." The annual foster family reunion the following year was hosted again at Harvest Table, but this time Claire served as my genuine co-host rather than my critic. She proudly introduced guests to my successful sister's restaurant and shared stories about my culinary achievements rather than making excuses for the venue. Our foster siblings were amazed by the transformation both in the restaurant's national recognition and in Claire's attitude toward my success. The evening featured a surprise announcement about our expansion plans and scholarship program for foster children interested in culinary careers funded by our growing profits. As I watched Derek and Claire dining regularly at our family table with genuine appreciation and respect, I understood that sometimes people need to face public consequences for private betrayals. Real family isn't about blood relations or assumptions of privilege. It's about mutual respect, support, and recognizing each other's worth, even when that recognition requires swallowing your own pride. The most satisfying aspect wasn't Derek's humiliation or Claire's remorse, but watching Madison and Mason beam with pride when their friends discovered that their aunt owned Portland's most famous restaurant. Family legacy isn't about protecting status or managing appearances. It's about building something meaningful that lifts everyone up, even those who initially try to tear it down. 6 months later, Derek called to thank me for a lesson he needed to learn about authentic relationship values. Claire had become my restaurant's most enthusiastic promoter on social media, sharing photos from every visit with genuine pride rather than obligatory tolerance. Their marriage had been strengthened by learning to value substance over superficial status, and Derek's career had actually benefited from being associated with my restaurant's success rather than distancing himself from it. The evening that began with Derek's panic over a $347 check had taught our entire family that justice is best served when people face the natural consequences of their choices, and that real reconciliation becomes possible when those consequences lead to genuine growth and understanding. Justice had been served alongside every meal, and the most delicious part was watching former critics become genuine supporters once they understood the difference between earned success and assumed privilege. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family forgiveness and finding your own strength. Sometimes the most important lesson we learn is that standing up for ourselves doesn't mean closing the door on reconciliation, but rather opening it on our own terms. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect your achievements? How did you find the balance between protecting yourself and keeping relationships open for genuine change? Share your stories in the comments below. Give this video a like. If it resonated with your own experiences, subscribe for more stories about finding strength through difficult family situations, and share this with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for their own worth. Remember that your success belongs to you, and real family will celebrate it rather than diminish it. Until next time, keep building the life you deserve one boundary at a time.